Chosen one, pay close attention. This is not a coincidence. They begged him to warn you, to give you a chance, to slow it down. And he didn't. He smiled and said, "It's too late." That moment is not punishment. It's a signal. You have crossed a threshold where guidance stops and responsibility begins. What's coming is bigger than desire, bigger than hope. It's the internal transfer of authority, the kind that shifts everything in your life. This isn't just spiritual rhetoric. In psychology, this is identity restructuring. Your old self is being dismantled so a higher version can emerge. In philosophy and leadership studies, it's the transition from follower to steward. Every challenge, every subtle shift in your environment, even the tension you feel now, is testing whether you can hold this power without being consumed by it. The world is responding to your inner state faster than ever, and people around you are reacting, even unconsciously, to the authority you're starting to embody. When he said, "You're next, God, now," it wasn't about ego or worship. It was about awakening to stewardship. Your decisions, presence, and energy now shape not just your reality, but the realities of others. Emotional storms, chaos, and resistance will test you, but they are no longer threats, they are feedback. This is where clarity replaces confusion, patience becomes leverage, and calm becomes power. You're stepping into a role where what you do and don't do matters at a scale you may only begin to understand. So if you're truly ready to see what's happening and step into it, stay with this message until the end. Watch, like, subscribe, and comment with 11. Not for luck, but as a conscious act of alignment. What you're about to learn isn't just motivation. It's the framework for holding power, mastering presence, and navigating the shift from being guided to being the guide. Once you understand it, your life will never feel the same again. There is a point in a person's evolution where advice loses its power. Not because the advice is wrong, but because you are no longer built to receive it. This is the moment when life stops explaining itself and starts testing you. Warnings bounce off, lessons repeat louder, and consequences replace conversations. It feels brutal at first, almost unfair, but this is the first sign that something inside you has shifted. You're no longer a student waiting for instructions. You're being prepared for responsibility. Most people misunderstand this phase. They think they're being ignored, punished, or abandoned. In reality, they've crossed an invisible line. Think of a child learning to walk. Eventually, the hands let go, not because the parents stopped caring, but because holding on would delay growth. When warnings stop working, it means your nervous system, your mind, and your intuition are being forced to learn through direct impact. This is where wisdom stops being theoretical and becomes embodied. This is also why fear spikes here. The brain craves certainty, and warnings provide that illusion. When they disappear, you're left alone with choice, consequence, and self-trust. But this discomfort is not a flaw in the process. It is the process. The ones who survive this stage don't become perfect. They become self-directed, and that is far more dangerous. That smile wasn't cruel. It wasn't mocking. It was quiet recognition. He smiled because he had already walked through the fire you're standing in now. He knew something they didn't, that stepping in to warn you would actually weaken you. Some lessons only lock into the soul when discovered alone, under pressure, without reassurance. He wasn't withholding help, he was respecting the transformation. There's a strange peace that comes when you realize someone else must face their own awakening. Interference delays destiny. He understood that saving you from the pain would steal the authority you were meant to grow into. Leadership isn't inherited through comfort. It's forged through solitude, confusion, and moments where you think you might fail. That smile said, "You're ready, even if you don't believe it yet." And here's the part most people miss. He smiled because he saw himself in you. Not the polished version, but the earlier, uncertain version. The one standing at the edge of change, asking for a sign. He knew that no explanation would be strong enough to replace what experience was about to teach you. Sometimes the most respectful thing a mentor can do is step aside and let life speak directly. When he said, "Too late, it wasn't doom, it was clarity." Too late means the internal shift has already happened. The old identity is cracking, even if you're still trying to hold it together. Your tolerance for illusion is gone. Your patience for surface-level answers has evaporated. You may not have words for it yet, but your system already knows. There's no going back. Psychologically, this is the point where the mind begins reorganizing itself. Old coping mechanisms stop working. Distractions lose their effect. Comfort feels hollow. This is not depression. It's disillusionment. And there's a difference. Disillusionment hurts because it removes the lies that once protected you. But it also clears the path forward. You can't unknow what you've seen. That's why too late carries weight. It signals irreversibility. The door behind you didn't slam. It dissolved. From here on, pretending will cost more than progressing. This is where many people panic because they realize the old version of themselves is no longer an option. But this is also where real strength is born. Not confidence, commitment. Power doesn't disappear when someone steps back. It transfers. Always. Authority moves quietly, without ceremony, without announcement. One day you're seeking guidance. The next, you notice people watching how you respond. Not because you asked for attention, but because responsibility has found you. This is the hidden law. When someone stops directing you, it's often because you're being positioned to direct yourself, and eventually others. This transfer doesn't come with celebration. It comes with weight. Decisions feel heavier. Consequences feel more personal. You realize no one is coming to fix things anymore, and that realization can either crush you or sharpen you. Those who resist it stay stuck, blaming the absence of guidance. Those who accept it develop something rare: internal authority. Historically, this pattern shows up everywhere, from leadership transitions to spiritual initiation rites. The guide withdraws. The student is left alone. Not because they're abandoned, but because authority cannot coexist with dependence. The moment you stop waiting for permission is the moment power quietly lands in your hands. The loneliness you feel right now isn't random. It's structural. Growth at this level requires separation, not emotionally, but energetically. The noise fades. The familiar voices lose relevance. Even people who once understood you seem distant. This can feel like loss, but it's actually alignment. You're being tuned to a different frequency, and not everything can follow. This stage is deeply uncomfortable because humans are wired for connection. But solitude here isn't isolation, it's calibration. You're learning to hear your own judgment without interference, to make decisions without consensus, to stand without applause. These skills can't be developed in crowds. They require silence, uncertainty, and time. And here's the quiet truth. Ascension doesn't feel like rising. It feels like shedding. You don't gain wings, you lose weight. Expectations, dependencies, roles that no longer fit, they fall away. What remains is simpler, calmer, and far more capable. If you feel alone right now, it's not because you've been left behind. It's because you're being prepared to stand at the front. There comes a quiet moment when you realize you no longer think the way you used to. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or certainty. It arrives subtly, through impatience with shallow conversations, through discomfort with old routines, through an internal pull you can't explain. This is threshold consciousness, the mental and spiritual point where regression becomes impossible. You may still doubt yourself, but something deeper has already decided. The mind hesitates, the soul does not. At this stage, clarity doesn't feel comforting, it feels heavy. You see patterns others don't. You notice cause and effect more sharply. You sense outcomes before they unfold. This awareness can be exhausting because ignorance used to be easier. But once perception expands, it cannot be compressed. You are now responsible for what you see, and that responsibility changes how you move through the world. Crossing this threshold also alters your relationship with time. You stop rushing toward answers and start observing consequences. You realize that most people are reacting, not choosing. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. This is the point of no return. Not because you've gained power, but because you've lost denial. Before anything new can emerge, something old must collapse. This isn't metaphorical, it's neurological. The brain resists change by clinging to identity. Who you thought you were fights to survive, even when that version no longer fits. This is why the transition feels like confusion, fatigue, or even grief. You're not breaking down. You're shedding a self that has expired. Psychological death often looks like uncertainty. You question your purpose. Your confidence dips. Your motivation feels inconsistent. But beneath that instability, a deeper structure is forming. Think of it like demolition before construction. The noise is unsettling, but it's necessary. Without this internal clearing, any power you gain would be built on a weak foundation. Those who resist this phase stay trapped in performance, pretending to be strong while avoiding transformation. Those who allow the death emerge quieter, less reactive, more grounded. They don't announce who they're becoming. They stabilize into it. Becoming next doesn't require bravado. It requires the courage to let an old identity die without immediately replacing it. Fear always shows up last, not first. That's important. It waits until you're close enough to matter. The intensity you feel now isn't proof of danger. It's proof of proximity. Fear guards thresholds. It exists to test readiness, not to stop you. But most people misread it as a warning instead of a challenge. Notice how fear has changed. It's no longer about survival. It's about responsibility. Not what if I fail, but what if I succeed and can't go back. This fear is more subtle, more psychological. It questions your right to step forward. It asks whether you're prepared to carry what comes next. This is not cowardice. This is the mind checking the weight of the crown. Those who pass this gate don't eliminate fear. They stop obeying it. They move with fear present, but no longer in control. That shift changes everything. Fear stops being a barrier and becomes a signal. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. Light alone doesn't sustain power. That's a hard truth, but a necessary one. Discipline, ambition, anger, hunger, these are not flaws, to be erased. They are forces to be integrated. Shadow integration means acknowledging the parts of you that want more, that refuse submission, that burn when challenged. Suppressing them doesn't make you virtuous. It makes you fragile. Many people try to stay pure and end up powerless. Others give in to darkness and lose their humanity. Integration is the middle path. You learn to access intensity without becoming cruel, to harness aggression without losing control. Stepping into higher authority doesn't make life easier. It makes it clearer. The paradox is this: the more capable you become, the less you can rely on others. Decisions land on you. Outcomes trace back to you. There's no one left to blame, and strangely, that brings peace. Responsibility replaces anxiety. At this level, control isn't about domination, it's about regulation. You manage your energy, your reactions, your timing. You stop explaining yourself to those who can't understand your perspective, not out of arrogance, but efficiency. The need for validation fades because you've learned to trust your own judgment. The God role isn't about superiority, it's about containment, holding complexity without collapsing, staying grounded while others panic, remaining calm when systems destabilize. It's a quiet strength, one that doesn't demand attention, but commands it naturally. There's a hard lesson that arrives late in the journey. Not everyone is meant to be rescued. At earlier stages, helping feels noble, necessary, even urgent. But once your awareness expands, you begin to see the cost. Every time you pull someone out of a struggle they haven't fully faced, you delay their growth and dilute your own focus. What once looked like compassion starts to feel like interference. This doesn't mean becoming cold or indifferent, it means understanding timing. Growth requires friction. Without pressure, strength doesn't develop. It decays. When you're chosen for greater responsibility, your role shifts from savior to example. Your presence alone becomes instructional. People either rise in response to it or drift away. Both outcomes are correct. The discomfort here comes from letting go of guilt. You realize you are not responsible for everyone's awakening, and the moment you release that burden, your energy returns to you. Clearer, sharper, more deliberate. This is not abandonment, it's alignment. Power at this level doesn't shout, it settles. Calm becomes your primary tool, not because you lack emotion, but because you've learned how easily emotion can be used against you. In moments where others react impulsively, you pause. That pause alone changes outcomes. It gives you leverage without force. Precision follows. You stop wasting words, time, or energy. Every action has intent. Every response has weight. You don't over-explain or over-commit. You choose carefully because you understand that attention is a finite resource. This isn't rigidity, it's respect for your own limits. Detachment completes the triad. You care deeply, but you're no longer entangled. Outcomes don't define your worth. Opinions don't destabilize you. This detachment isn't numbness, it's clarity. And clarity, more than intensity, is what sustains long-term authority. Something strange begins to happen once you stabilize into this role. People react to you before you speak. Some become guarded, others lean in. A few feel threatened without knowing why. This is silent recognition, the subconscious response to internal authority. It has nothing to do with status, appearance, or volume. It's energetic. You'll notice conversations shift around you. People reveal more than they intended or become unusually cautious. This isn't manipulation, it's perception. Humans are wired to sense certainty, and certainty unsettles those who rely on chaos. You don't announce your strength. Others feel it. The key here is restraint. Recognition can tempt ego, but indulgence weakens presence. Those who maintain quiet consistency gain influence without effort. They don't chase acknowledgement. They let it come and go without attachment. What follows the internal collapse isn't euphoria, it's stillness. A grounded calm that doesn't depend on circumstances. You stop hoping for things to work out and start trusting your capacity to respond. This is hope without illusion, confidence rooted in capability, not fantasy. You no longer romanticize struggle, nor do you fear it. Challenges become logistical, not personal. Problems are assessed, not dramatized. This shift alone reduces suffering. Life doesn't become easier, but it becomes clearer. And clarity reduces unnecessary pain. This calm is contagious. Others sense it and draw stability from it. Not because you reassure them with words, but because your presence communicates safety. You've survived internal chaos. External chaos no longer intimidates you. The final step is quiet acceptance. No announcement, no ceremony, just an internal decision. I will carry this. You stop asking if you're ready and start acting as if you are. Responsibility doesn't wait for confidence. Confidence grows from responsibility. At this point, guidance no longer arrives externally. Insight comes through reflection, pattern recognition, and lived experience. You trust your judgment because it has been tested. Mistakes don't break you, they refine you. Authority becomes something you inhabit, not something you perform. After acceptance, nothing explodes outward, but everything subtly rearranges. The world doesn't announce that you've changed. Instead, it responds. Conversations take unexpected turns. Doors open without effort, while others close without explanation. You begin to notice that events seem timed, almost coordinated, as if reality itself is watching how you move. This is recalibration, not reward, assessment. What's different now is not luck, but sensitivity. Your actions carry more weight, so life answers more precisely. Small decisions ripple further. Mistakes echo louder. Wins feel quieter, but more solid. You're no longer tested on desire or intention, but on accuracy. Can you choose cleanly? Can you act without desperation? The environment mirrors your internal state with unsettling honesty. This is when many realize power isn't dramatic, it's responsive. Reality doesn't bend for emotion anymore. It responds to alignment. When your inner direction stabilizes, the outer world adjusts to match it. Not instantly, not comfortably, but unmistakably. One of the strangest changes is what disappears. Old problems fade without closure. Conflicts that once consumed you lose relevance overnight. You don't solve them. They simply stop asking for your attention. At first, this feels disorienting. You're used to carrying weight. Letting it go can feel like losing purpose. But this collapse is necessary. These struggles were training wheels. They built resilience, awareness, and discipline, but they were never meant to be permanent. When you outgrow them, continuing to engage would be regression, not loyalty. Power requires discernment, knowing which battles no longer deserve your energy. The space left behind can feel empty, even lonely, but it's fertile. This is where higher-level challenges will enter, ones that demand strategy instead of survival. You're not escaping difficulty. You're being upgraded. At this stage, lessons arrive compressed. There's less room for trial and error. Situations escalate faster, and the margin for emotional reaction shrinks. Pressure becomes the teacher. Not cruelty, efficiency. You're being trained to think clearly when stakes are high, when time is limited, when others are watching. These moments don't ask how you feel. They ask how you respond. You'll notice your instincts sharpening. Decisions that once took hours now take seconds. Not impulsively, but decisively. Clarity under pressure is one of the rarest skills in the world, and it's built only here. What looks like stress from the outside is actually refinement. Power doesn't grow in comfort. It grows where hesitation costs something. Each high-pressure moment leaves you calmer than before, less shaken, more centered. That's how you know the training is working. The reward for this path isn't pleasure, applause, or ease. It's internal sovereignty, the ability to remain stable while everything else moves. You develop a calm that doesn't need conditions. Chaos doesn't disappear, but it loses authority over you. This calm changes how you experience life. Wins don't intoxicate you. Losses don't dismantle you. You stop riding emotional highs and lows and start operating from a steady center. This isn't numbness. It's ownership of your inner state. And that ownership is addictive in the healthiest way. Most people chase happiness. You discover something stronger. Self-trust. Knowing that no matter what happens, you can think, choose, and act without collapsing. That quiet confidence becomes your greatest advantage. Once authority stabilizes inside you, others feel it, often before they understand it. Some become defensive, others become deferential. A few idealize you. None of this is about you personally, it's projection. People respond to certainty the way animals respond to calm dominance, instinctively. Fear arises in those who rely on chaos or validation. Your steadiness exposes their instability. Worship appears in those who are searching for direction. Both reactions can be dangerous if you identify with them. One tempts you to shrink. The other tempts you to inflate. True mastery here is neutrality. You don't absorb their fear, and you don't feed on their admiration. You remain grounded, aware that projection says more about the observer than the observed. This restraint preserves your clarity and your humanity. Something fundamental changes in how you relate to time. Urgency, once mistaken for ambition, quietly dissolves. You no longer feel compelled to react immediately, prove quickly, or move just to feel in control. Instead, you begin to wait, not passively, but deliberately. This patience isn't hesitation. It's confidence that timing matters as much as action. You start to notice how often people sabotage outcomes by rushing. Deals collapse, relationships fracture, decisions backfire, not because they were wrong, but because they were premature. You learn to let situations reveal themselves, to allow others to show their true intentions, to observe patterns before committing energy. This restraint gives you an advantage that can't be faked. Strategic patience creates gravity. When you don't chase, things approach you differently. Conversations deepen, opportunities clarify. You act less often, but when you do, outcomes tend to stick. This is when patience stops feeling like waiting and starts feeling like positioning. The ability to wait while others rush is a quiet form of dominance. You see it everywhere once you recognize it. Those who sacrifice long-term leverage for short-term relief, who trade future freedom for immediate comfort. You stop doing that, not because you're disciplined by force, but because your perspective has widened. Delayed gratification rewires your sense of reward. You begin to value momentum over excitement, structure over stimulation. Short-term dopamine loses its grip. You don't need constant reassurance that you're winning. You're willing to build in silence, knowing the compounding effect will speak later. This shift multiplies your leverage across every domain: work, relationships, personal growth. While others burn energy chasing outcomes, you conserve it, redirect it, and release it only when it creates disproportionate impact. That's power most never experience, simply because they can't wait long enough to earn it. Your thinking stretches. Problems that once felt urgent now look small when viewed across years instead of weeks. You stop asking, "What do I want right now?" and start asking, "What does this lead to?" This is long-range cognition, the ability to hold future consequences in the present moment. Neurologically, this requires restraint. The brain is wired for immediate reward, but leadership demands override. You strengthen the circuits responsible for planning, foresight, and emotional regulation. Decisions become less reactive and more architectural. You're no longer managing moments. You're designing trajectories. This is why high-level leaders often appear calm, even slow. They aren't disengaged. They're processing at scale. When you develop long-range vision, impulsivity feels expensive. You become protective of your future self. That alone changes everything. The separation doesn't arrive with conflict. It's quieter than that. You simply stop fitting. Conversations feel repetitive. Environments feel constricting. Habits that once comforted you now feel heavy. There's no dramatic fallout, just gradual disengagement. Alignment replaces attachment. This can feel like loss, even when it's necessary. You might grieve people who are still alive, places that still exist, versions of yourself that no longer return. But this separation isn't rejection, it's recalibration. You're moving toward contexts that match who you've become, not who you were. What's important here is restraint. You don't need to announce your departure or justify your distance. You let the separation happen naturally. This preserves dignity on both sides and keeps your energy clean. Growth doesn't require burning bridges, only crossing new terrain. At a certain point, control stops feeling like effort. You no longer push outcomes into place. You influence through presence, tone, and timing. People listen differently when you speak. Situations stabilize when you enter them, not because you dominate, but because you're grounded. This ease comes from alignment. Your thoughts, actions, and values are no longer at war. You're not compensating, performing, or overcorrecting. You trust your internal compass, and that trust translates outward. Others feel it, even if they can't explain it. Effortless control is the result of deep internal order. You've learned when to act and when not to, when to speak and when silence does more. This isn't manipulation, it's mastery. And it only appears once force is no longer required. Same grounded human tone. No repetition, no artificial rhythm. This closes the arc with clarity, depth, and quiet power. At some point, you notice that emotional storms no longer pull you under. This isn't because you stopped feeling, it's because feeling stopped owning you. Anger rises, but it passes. Disappointment appears, but it doesn't settle in your bones. Joy comes without making you reckless. You haven't hardened, you've stabilized. Emotional invulnerability is often misunderstood as coldness. In reality, it's the ability to stay present without being hijacked. You listen better. You respond instead of react. You allow emotions to inform decisions without letting them dictate them. This shift alone protects you from countless mistakes most people never see coming. What makes this gift powerful is its subtlety. Nothing about you seems dramatic, yet everything about you feels composed. In moments where others unravel, you remain clear. That clarity becomes a refuge, not just for you, but for those who rely on your steadiness. Challenges stop feeling personal. When something resists you, you don't ask, "Why is this happening to me?" You ask, "What is this showing me?" Resistance becomes information. Delay becomes feedback. Even failure carries instruction. Nothing is wasted. This shift transforms frustration into strategy. Instead of draining you, obstacles sharpen your thinking. You adjust angles, refine timing, strengthen structure. Each challenge adds data, and data, when interpreted correctly, creates advantage. What once slowed you down now improves your approach. You begin to welcome difficulty, not emotionally, but intellectually. You understand that friction reveals weak points before they become disasters. Problems stop being enemies. They become collaborators in refinement. You move less, but everything moves more. This is the paradox of mastery. When alignment is complete, effort becomes efficient. You stop overworking, overthinking, overreaching. Instead, you identify the smallest action that creates the largest shift. This law applies everywhere. One conversation replaces 10 explanations. One decision eliminates months of confusion. One boundary saves years of resentment. You learn to respect energy the way others respect money, spending it only where returns compound. This efficiency isn't laziness, it's precision. You've learned that force signals imbalance. When things require constant pushing, something is misaligned. True power adjusts the system instead of exhausting itself within it. Success stops being about accumulation. You start thinking in terms of structures, systems that function without your constant presence. You ask different questions now. What lasts? What scales? What outlives me? Legacy becomes less about being remembered and more about what continues. This perspective humbles you. You see how temporary individual effort is compared to well-built frameworks. You focus on foundations instead of recognition, on stability instead of spotlight. Your work becomes quieter, but more enduring. Legacy thinking also sharpens ethics. When you build for the future, shortcuts lose appeal. You care about consequences beyond immediate reward. This mindset is rare, and it's what separates influence from impact. The end of this path isn't dominance, it's balance. You become untouchable, not because nothing can reach you, but because nothing can control you. You feel deeply, yet remain centered. You engage fully, yet stay unattached. Humanity and authority coexist. This balance is the true crown. You don't need to harden your heart to protect it. You don't need to isolate to remain stable. You've learned when to open and when to hold, when to step forward and when to remain still. You're not above others. You're anchored within yourself. And that is why nothing shakes you anymore. What you've just heard isn't a fantasy of power or a promise of escape. It's a map of inner evolution. The path you're on doesn't lead to dominance over others, but mastery over yourself. Each phase you recognized, loss, pressure, silence, recalibration was not random. It was instructional. Psychology calls it identity restructuring. Philosophy calls it self-authorship. Spiritual traditions call it initiation. Different languages, same truth. Consciousness expands through responsibility, not comfort. The calm you're developing isn't emptiness, it's integration. The detachment isn't apathy, it's clarity. And the isolation was never punishment. It was preparation. When the noise fell away, you learned to hear what actually guides you. This is how leaders are formed, how vision stabilizes, how inner authority replaces external permission. Not suddenly, not loudly, but permanently. If this resonated, take it seriously, but not dramatically. Apply it quietly. Observe more. React less. Build slowly. Let life continue to respond to who you are becoming. The real transformation doesn't announce itself. It shows in how you move when no one is watching. Thank you for listening. If this kind of depth, clarity, and grounded power speaks to you, subscribe and stay connected. More insight is coming, and the next step is always revealed to those who are ready to notice it.